I've spent my life unlocking doors for strangers, but Tuesday morning I opened my own wife's car, and everything changed. The door wasn't locked. That was the first red flag. The second was in the cup holder, her wedding ring. Not hidden, not forgotten. Left there, like she wanted me to find it. Emily wore that ring through 23 years of chaos, childbirth, surgeries, hurricanes. She never took it off. I picked it up. The engraving still read, "Forever yours, 2001." But it didn't feel like mine anymore. I didn't storm out, didn't ask. I just walked inside and waited. Because the thing about being a locksmith is, you don't just know how to open doors, you know when one's been opened. And standing there in my kitchen, I felt it. Someone else had already walked through and left the door cracked, just wide enough to invite a war. In the next 60 seconds, you'll see why a locksmith walked away from his own home. So I pocketed the ring, sat at the table, and watched time. I'm Jack Miller. For more than 2 decades, I've made a living turning panic into calm. You lock yourself out at 2 a.m., your toddler's asleep inside, the dog's barking, the stove's still warm. I've been that steady voice on the way over. I show up, set my toolbox down, breathe once, and let the mechanics take over. Pins, springs, tolerances. You respect the process, you win the day. That's how I built Miller Security Solutions. One call at a time, one promise kept at a time. Folks in 3 counties know I don't cut corners, I don't raise my voice, and I don't leave until the door turns smooth. I've seen people at their worst and their best in the span of a hinge. That job teaches discipline, patience, and something else, pattern recognition. When something's off, you feel it in your hands before your head. That Tuesday, the pattern broke at my own front door. Emily's 45, works as a dental hygienist downtown. Gentle hands, firm backbone, the kind of woman who remembers your hygienist appointment and your mother's birthday. Our son, Luke, just graduated in computer science, first in our family to walk that stage. We're a middle-class snapshot, a 30-year mortgage, 2 used cars that still have miles in them, church on Easter, barbecue on Sundays when he's in town. We split chores. She handles the garden beds. I handle anything with wires or a deadbolt. It's not flashy, but it's ours. The neighbors wave. The mailman knows our names. The dog next door thinks our yard is his. From the curb, we look like a calendar photo for steady. That's the thing about homes. From the sidewalk, you can't see the hairline cracks. You can't hear the quiet questions growing under the paint. By that Tuesday morning, one of those questions had learned how to speak. We met at a community barbecue back in 2001, a paper plate of bad potato salad between us, and the kind of laugh you hear before you see the person. I was 20-something, broke, and stubborn. She was sunshine in a denim jacket. We slow danced near a folding table, swapped numbers on a napkin, and promised to try. When I finally bought her ring, I worked nights to make it happen. The jeweler etched "Forever Yours" of 2001 inside the band. I believed in that line like I believed in torque specs. You said it right, it holds. Through childbirth and layoffs, hurricanes and hospital rooms, that ring stayed put. It was our little oath you could touch. Maybe that's why the sight of it later, out of place, carried so much weight. Hardware is honest. It either fits or it doesn't. That day, our promise felt like a bolt that no longer grabbed. Tuesday started ordinary. Coffee drip, the sound of Emily's heels, a kiss at the door that felt routine more than warm. I headed to the garage to sort my kits for the day. Auto tools on the left, residential picks on the right, commercial blanks in labeled trays. When I went to move her Honda, I saw it still in the driveway. That was odd. She should have been halfway to the office. The door opened too easily under my hand, and the cabin smelled faintly like her citrus hand lotion. Her purse was gone. Her travel mug was rinsed and sitting by the sink inside. From 10 feet away, our life looked normal. From 2 feet, the seams were visible. I can read a door by its resistance. That morning, our house had none. I told myself I was being dramatic. Then I saw the detail that told the truth. Small, silent, and bright. It was right there in the cup holder, her wedding ring, sitting like spare change waiting for tolls. Not wedged, Not hidden, not tucked safe in the console. Placed. I picked it up and felt the nicks I knew by heart. The soft wear on the edge where her fingers met. The engraving still shone. Forever yours, 2001. For 23 years, that ring had been the period at the end of every argument. The non-negotiable. Emily showered with it, gardened with it, sterilized instruments with it under fluorescent lights. Feels wrong without it, she used to say, and I believed her. A tiny circle of gold shouldn't change the air in a room, but it did. It made the kitchen colder and the hallway longer. I slipped it into my pocket, not to hide it, but to hold the only honest thing in reach. The alarm wasn't loud. It was certain. I didn't explode. I set the ring on the counter at dinner and asked a simple question. Emily blinked once, picked it up, and smiled like a receptionist. Bright, professional, non-committal. "Jim," she said. "Oak Street." Took it off to wash, forgot to put it back on. She slid it onto her finger as if the action erased the placement I'd already seen. I nodded because men my age learned to measure twice before cutting once. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her voice carried that tiny wobble people get when they need the room to agree with them. I washed the dishes after, slow, listening to the house breathe. The television murmured from the living room. The refrigerator clicked. 2 decades together teaches you someone's cadence. That night, hers was half a beat off. Not much, just enough that every word had a shadow. The story fit, until you checked the map. I drive this town for a living. I know which lights are mistimed, which alleys flood, which storefronts change names every May. There isn't a gym on Oak Street. Not now, not last year. Emily's belonged to a women-only place on Riverside Drive for 3 years, the kind with pastel walls and laminated rules about clean sneakers. We joked about it over dinner. That's the problem with lies. They forget your memory has a map. In my line of work, you don't argue with a blueprint. You measure, you verify, you try the key. I replayed her route in my head, where she'd turn, how long each leg takes in morning traffic. Her claim didn't fit the grid. I didn't need a confrontation. I needed confirmation. I dried my hands, set the dish towel down, and looked at the front door. Some thresholds you step over with your boots on. I was already halfway through, but the map in my head told me she was lying. That night the house felt unfamiliar, like a hotel that borrowed our furniture. Emily breathed soft beside me, steady as a metronome, and I stared at the ceiling fan counting rotations like seconds on a safe. People think infidelity is fireworks. Sometimes it starts as chalk dust in your lungs. A hairline crack you can't unsee. In locks, failure begins small. A worn pin, a spring that's tired, a key cut a fraction shallow. It still turns for a while, or a bee. Then one day it doesn't, and everyone acts surprised. Lying there, I realized the surprise had left the building hours ago. I wasn't angry. Anger is noisy. This was colder, cleaner. A checklist forming in a quiet room. If I was wrong, I'd owe an apology and a long weekend away. If I was right, I'd need proof. Facts that didn't need my voice to explain them. Either way, dawn was coming. In the morning, I called Mark Ramirez, a friend from high school who became a private investigator. I asked a hypothetical. He heard the truth. He slid a small black tracker across the desk and looked me in the eye. "Jack," he said, "once you open a door, you can't pretend it's still closed. Don't do this if you don't want the answer." I paid cash. No speeches, no lecture, just a warning I could live with. "Take notes," he added. "Details win courtrooms." I nodded. Details also break hearts. I waited until Emily left for work, then rolled onto the driveway with a rag and a plan. Old knees meet cold concrete. Every man over 40 knows that sound. I found a clean, flat section of the subframe behind the rear axle, wiped it down, and pressed the tracker until the magnets bit. A soft click, solid and certain, the way a lock tells you when the key is true. Back inside, I opened the app. The blue dot sat over our address. I took a breath and watched it settle, then slid the phone into my pocket like it might overhear me thinking. That device didn't feel like spying. It felt like a level on a crooked picture frame. Either it's straight or it isn't. I've trusted tools longer than I've trusted talk. When Emily's taillights finally disappeared around the bend, I stared at that dot and realized I was about to learn something permanent. The first day, the blue dot behaved like a model citizen. Maple Street to Harrison to the garage behind Dr. Harris's office. Emily's normal route, on time to the minute. The dot idled where staff park, barely moving except for a lunch break that matched her usual 15 minutes. It was almost a relief, like checking your blood pressure and finding it steady after a salty weekend. I told myself good men get suspicious, great men get over it. Maybe the ring was a brain cramp and the story was sloppy truth. That night she came home with the same tired smile and talked about instruments and insurance codes. If I had pulled the plug then, we might have limped along for years. But tools have a way of asking for second looks. The app sat on my nightstand like a quiet clock, and clocks, like trackers, aren't in the business of opinions, just time. Day 2, the blue dot left our neighborhood and drifted downtown as usual, until it stopped 3 blocks short of the dental office. Murphy's Diner. I know that lot. Old men with newspapers, mechanics with stained knuckles, a waitress who calls everyone Harn. It's not a crime to eat eggs before work, but Emily isn't a diner at dawn person. The dot sat there longer than coffee takes. I grabbed my keys and took the long way, the way that puts you across the street with a clean line of sight. I parked under a tired maple tree and killed the engine. From behind my windshield, I could see the windows fogged from griddles and breath, the neon sign flickering like a heartbeat. The dot didn't move. Neither did I. When you've opened enough doors, you learn patience isn't waiting. It's preparing. Whatever walked out of Murphy's was going to tell me more than any text. 10 minutes passed like an hour. I watched the diner's door stretch open and spring shut, customers drifting out with that pinched look morning people get when the day's already taken a bite. My coffee sat untouched in the cup holder. My hands sat still on my knees. I wasn't hunting drama. I wanted facts, the simple kind you can't talk around. The app pinged. The dot nudged. A woman in a navy coat stepped into view. Emily. She checked her phone, smoothed her hair in the glass, and smiled at someone I couldn't see yet. She holds her shoulders a certain way when she's at ease, a tilt I know like a combination. She had that tilt now. A shadow followed her through the doorframe. Broad shoulders, gray at the temples, the kind of suit you don't buy off the rack. My heart didn't race. My breathing didn't change. I just started remembering everything. He walked beside Emily like he'd rehearsed it, close enough to touch, not close enough to hide. He held the door, she laughed, and they moved toward the cars with the quiet choreography of people who've done it before. I focused on the details older men trust: make and model, a scratch above the rear wheel, hospital parking sticker on the windshield. He put a hand at the small of her back. That move carries history. When they paused by her Honda, he leaned in and said something that made her look down and blush. I caught the plates. 6 numbers and a county tag I recognized. You work long enough around alarms and locks, you make friends with dispatchers. A few calls later, I had a name that fit the sticker. Dr. Andrew Pierce, cardiology, St. Mary's, the heart doctor. The irony will land later. Right then, I was busy not making a scene. He kissed her like he meant it. Not a quick peck, not a clumsy goodbye. A kiss that says there's a before and an after. The sort of kiss married people save for kitchens at midnight or porches after long days. In the gray light of a diner parking lot, it looked almost ordinary, which made it worse. There are moments in a man's life when he learns whether he's a fuse or a breaker. I didn't blow, I flipped. I felt everything narrow, edges sharp, colors thin, sound distant. I watched her reach for her keys, watched him touch her wrist, watched the small smile that used to belong to me. If this door closed, I would let it stay closed. Late Friday, the blue dot slid past downtown and climbed toward the Marriott that watches our town like a lighthouse. Business travelers, banquets, rooms that smell like new carpet and old stories. I parked 2 lots over, a man alone in a truck pretending to answer emails. The lobby's glass front gave me a clean angle, the kind strangers ignore when they're busy being someone else. I wasn't hunting scandal. I was collecting proof I could live with. The revolving door kept turning, a metronome for secrets. Then I saw her. Navy coat, hair tucked behind one ear like she does when she wants to look composed. A minute later, the black sedan slid into frame. Dr. Pierce moved like a man used to good news. They didn't touch it first. They didn't have to. They shared direction. Together they crossed the tile toward the elevators, not rushing, not hiding, just sure. That certainty was my alarm. I don't trust memory when it's angry. I trust clocks. The camera grabbed the lobby through the glass just as they reached the elevator. The digital timestamp burned red in the corner, 6:47 p.m. I took 3 stills, doors closing, numbers climbing, empty foyer. The car dinged somewhere above, and I listened to the sound bleed into traffic like nothing happened. I stood there in the half-light with proof that fit in a pocket. Years from now, I won't remember the brand of the carpet or the art on the wall. I'll remember the number, 6:47. My hands were steady because my mind was bright cold, the way air feels in February when you open the garage and see your breath. I set the camera down on the seat beside me and exhaled. A timestamp isn't an opinion. It's a place you can stand. That night it became the ground under my feet. At 7:15 my phone buzzed. Emily. Still at the office, Dr. Harris has an emergency, don't wait up. I read it twice, the way you read a bill that doubled overnight. The lie slid across my screen with perfect spelling and polite punctuation. I stared through the windshield at a hotel that didn't know my name and realized there was nothing to discuss anymore. Once I would have asked questions, invited explanations, tried to thread a needle that kept breaking in my hands. Not tonight. The tracker showed her car sleeping in the garage below me. The elevator numbers moved again, soft and cheerful. I didn't reply. The older you get, the more you understand silence is a sentence. I placed the phone face down on the passenger seat and watched the lobby empty of people and full of truth. Somewhere between still and office, a marriage ended. The punctuation didn't save it. My fingers shook a little when I started the engine, but the feeling in my chest was frost, not fire. Anger wants witnesses. Resolve doesn't. I drove the long way home past dark storefronts in the high school field where Luke learned to fail kindly and try again. I thought about how many doors I'd opened for neighbors who locked themselves out, how I'd never forced one when finesse would do. At the kitchen table I laid out what I had. GPS logs, photos, times, places. Then I wrote down what I didn't have. Excuses I'd believe. The list was short. Older men like me don't need speeches. We need steps. I brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon and pulled fresh paper from the printer. If there was going to be a reckoning, it would be orderly. By midnight, the plan fit on a page. By 1, my hands were steady. Decision is a heater. I cleared the table and started lining the pieces up like a contractor planning a remodel. Day, time, location, arrows for movement. Notes in the margins when a lie kissed a proof. Marriott at 6:47, text at 7:15, Murphy's on Tuesdays, office entries that didn't match the posted hours. I printed a simple timeline and taped it to the wall above the dining chairs. From a step back, the mess became a line you could walk with your finger. Every family has a wall where history gets made, growth charts, vacation photos, school awards. Ours just became a courtroom exhibit. I wasn't trying to hurt Emily. I was trying not to hurt myself twice, once by betrayal, once by confusion. When the last page went up, I took a picture of the whole thing. If I woke up and doubted my memory, I'd have a map. Maps don't mind if your heart stutters. I pulled a manila envelope from the desk where we keep warranties and recipes, the drawer nobody checks until something breaks. Inside went copies, tracker logs, 3 key photos, a summary page Dana would respect. Then I slid in the papers Dana drafted, petition, disclosures, signatures neat and final. I sealed the flap and wrote one word on the front in block letters so there'd be no mistake. Emily, not M, not honey. Names mean things when the ground tilts. I held the envelope to gauge its weight, not heavy, but heavier than a promise should ever feel. Older men will tell you, paperwork is the closest thing to armor a peaceful person gets. I placed the envelope on the counter under the light and stood there with my hands on either side like I was bracing a ladder. There are jobs you can outsource. This wasn't one. I wasn't delivering mail. I was delivering truth. The letter took 3 tries. First draft was too long, a history lesson no one asked for. Second was too sharp. anger talking like it paid rent. The third fit on a hotel notepad I'd stuck in my pocket weeks earlier when I was still deciding who I wanted to be. 5 words, printed slow, so there'd be no misread. Don't look for me. Jack. I didn't sign it with love or with hate, just with a name that had work to do. Some men my age would have written more, tried to teach a class in the ruins. I chose a clean exit. The note wasn't a threat or a riddle, it was a boundary. I slipped it on top of the envelope and imagined future me reading it when doubt knocked at 2 a.m. It said what I needed it to say. The conversation ended when the truth did. Monday morning was chosen on purpose. Weekdays make statements quieter and sharper. I made the bed like I always do. Hospital corners, pillows fluffed, the ordinary dignity of an ordinary chore. Then I placed the envelope where Emily's head would land if she laid down to cry. On top, the hotel photo of her and Dr. Pierce stepping toward the elevator. Faces clear, posture casual, timestamp bright. Beside it, I set my wedding ring. It caught a slice of winter light and threw it across the duvet like a line you don't step over. I didn't press the ring into the pillow. I let it rest. For 23 years it said always. Today it said enough. I stood at the doorway longer than I meant to, memorizing the arrangement the way a locksmith memorizes a clean pin stack. When she walked in later, there would be no confusion. Clarity is a kind of mercy. I moved through the house one room at a time like I was checking a job site before turning in the keys. Photos stayed, furniture stayed, the grooves in the hardwood where Luke raced toy trucks stayed. I took only what mattered, my father's tools from the workbench, the notebook with the timeline, a sealed letter for Luke just in case. I checked the stove, the windows, the back door latch that always needs a firmer hand in winter. The dog next door barked at nothing. The heat kicked on inside. I could have filled the silence with speeches to ghosts. I didn't. I opened the front closet and touched the coat Emily wears in February, the one with a missing button I always meant to replace. Not my job anymore. I set my house key on the entry table and left the spare in the drawer where it's always lived. Some closures deserve ceremony. This one got accuracy. I stood inside the threshold and rested my palm against the wood I'd sanded and stained a dozen summers ago. That door has heard us laughing on snow days and arguing over money at 11 p.m., has clicked behind first steps and last words. I can tell a door's health by how it closes. Too fast is a slam, too slow is a stall. This one settled like it understood. I pulled it shut, turned the deadbolt out of muscle memory, then unlocked it again because I'm not a man who traps people. The house exhaled. So did I. I walked to the truck without looking back, an old habit from leaving job sites I know I won't see again. The engine caught on the first turn. I eased into the street, merged with the quiet of a Monday, and felt the weight shift from my chest to the road behind me. Some exits echo. Mine made a clean click. Out back by the alley dumpster, I slid the SIM tray out with a paperclip and snapped the card between my fingers. It didn't fight, just gave with a dry little crack, like a twig in winter. I tossed the halves into separate bags, lids thudding shut a second apart. People think disappearing is drama. It's not. It's a list. New number, new routine, new silence. I wiped my phone, set up the burner Mark gave me, and wrote the digits on the inside cover of my notebook because muscle memory reaches for old habits. Then I sat on the tailgate and let the cold morning burn my lungs clean. After 23 years, the loudest sound in my life was nothing at all. I'd cut the tether that let panic drag me back. When I climbed into the truck and checked the mirrors, I saw a man I recognized, older around the eyes, steadier in the jaw, pointed forward. The apartment sat above Martinez Electronics, a narrow set of stairs that smelled like solder and cardboard. One bedroom, a kitchenette that tried its best, a window that looked out over an ocean of parking lot. I carried in 2 boxes and a toolbox and set them on the laminate like I was christening a ship with water instead of wine. The hum from downstairs felt honest. Transformers, compressors, the heartbeat of repairs. I made the bed with a new set of sheets that still felt like the store, lined up 3 shirts in the closet, and set my father's chisels on the dresser like family photos. When I turned on the lamp, the room warmed one shade. Not home, not yet, but mine. I cracked the window and let the smell of rain on hot asphalt drift in. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for a garage door I couldn't control. I bought a six-pack from the corner store and took one bottle to the chair by the window. The first swallow wasn't celebration, it was punctuation. I watched the sun drop behind the strip mall like a slow closing door and listened to the evening traffic soften. It's strange what emptiness removes. No clatter of keys at 6:12, no voice calling from the hallway, no background explanation rehearsed in a mirror I couldn't see. Just the low thrum of neon and the occasional laugh from a couple walking a dog that didn't know about betrayal. I set the bottle on the sill and counted breaths the way the ER told me to after an old scare, 4 in, 6 out, until my shoulders decided to lower. When I finally stood, the room didn't tilt. That was the gift. Not joy, not yet. Balance. I slept with the window open and left the phone on the table, face down. The burner rang late morning, a sound that felt like it belonged to someone braver than me. Mark didn't waste time. "Jack, what did you do?" he asked, then answered himself. "Never mind, I know. She came by the office wrecked, said she found papers and a photo on the bed. She wants to hire me." I pictured Emily standing under those fluorescent lights, eyes red, voice small, and felt nothing useful. "Tell her you can't," I said. "We're friends." Mark sighed, a tired sound men our age know. "You sure about your path?" I looked at the notebook on my table. Times, places, decisions. "I'm sure about not walking backward." He was quiet a beat. "All right, no breadcrumbs." The phrase fit like a wrench in my palm. After we hung up, I realized something simple and final. My life could now be explained in a sentence. I chose to leave before I chose to explode. I went through the apartment with a mechanic's eye. No souvenirs, no social media, no trail a curious person could follow with an afternoon and a hunch. I paid cash at the diner downstairs, set the burner to silent, and kept my truck parked a block away under a busted streetlight. I changed my route to the shop and my coffee order so nothing felt like a flag. Men in their 50s become creatures of habit. Sometimes survival means rewriting the script. I taped a sheet of paper inside the cabinet above the sink. Rent due date, Mark's number, Dana's number, Luke's number, sealed in an envelope for emergencies only. I sharpened 2 pencils and placed them beside the notebook because it's hard to lie to yourself in graphite. Then I took the ring from my pocket, set it in the bottom drawer, and closed it gently. The click was small. The decision was not. Some photographs are meant for a son to see from his father. 3 days passed like 10. Then the burner lit up with a number I knew anyway. "Dad?" Luke's voice carried that tight edge men get when they're holding something heavy by the wrong handle. "Mom's saying you disappeared. She's crying. What's going on?" I told him to meet me at the Denny's off the interstate, the one with the cracked E in the sign and coffee that tastes like persistence. "Just us," I said. "I'll explain." He agreed, hesitant, loyal to both sides of his life. After we hung up, I sat quietly and looked at the chair across from mine, at the space my son would fill. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike, my hand lifting off the seat, his wobble turning into a line. This would be another release. I packed the folder, slid the ring in on top like a period, and wrote down the time I left. Old habits keep you honest. The parking lot shined with last night's rain. Inside, the air smelled like syrup and stories. Luke was already in a corner booth, elbows on the table, eyes doing the math of a man who wants answers he might not like. We hugged the way fathers and grown sons hug, brief, solid, no nonsense. The waitress called me Hun and poured coffee without asking. I slid the manila folder across. "I won't talk over it," I said. "You look, then ask." He nodded and opened the flap like it might bite. First the logs, then the photos. Marriott at 6:47 p.m., Murphy's, the elevator. Emily's text, the kind of facts that don't blink. I watched him the way I used to watch him at T-ball, eyes tracking, jaw set, a boy learning rules he didn't write. The clatter of plates around us made a normal soundtrack to a day that wouldn't be normal again. Luke took his time, the way his mother taught him to read road signs twice. He went page by page, not skipping, not stalling. When he reached the hotel stills, his hand paused on the edge of the photo. He looked up, then back down, as if the paper might change if he gave it a chance. "How long?" he asked. 4 months I can prove," I said. "Maybe longer." He closed his eyes and exhaled through his nose like a runner who hit a hill sooner than expected. The waitress set down a plate of eggs he didn't remember ordering. He didn't touch them. "You sure?" he tried, because sons want there to be a mistake. I nodded. I wanted to be wrong. The folder sat between us like a third person at the table who didn't need coffee. When he finally pushed it back, the room felt smaller and the air felt older. Silence handled the first round. Luke stared at the sugar caddy, tapping one packet with a fingernail, soft, steady, thinking. Then the questions came in a voice that was careful with me. "What are you going to do? Where are you living? Are you safe?" I answered each with the calm I'd practiced. Apartment above the electronics store, paperwork filed, plan in motion. He nodded, eyes reddening but dry. "She lied," he said finally, as if testing the words for fit. "Yes," I said, "and I'm not going to perform for it." He looked at the ring in the folder, that tiny circle glinting under fluorescent lights, and something in him shifted from boy to man. He pushed the folder back to me and sat up straighter. "I need a minute," he whispered. The waitress topped off our cups and pretended not to notice. Outside, a semi blew past and rattled the windows. Inside, something settled. When he spoke again, the anger had arrived. Not loud, but final. "I can't respect that," Luke said, meaning the lie, the months, the ease. "I don't know what I'll do about Mom yet, but I can't pretend." I told him the only rule I had left as a father. You decide your relationship with your mother. Not me. Not this folder. You. He nodded, jaw tight, eyes clear. We paid at the register like any two men after any breakfast. In the parking lot, we stood by his car a minute longer than weather allowed. He hugged me again, harder, then drove off with the careful focus of someone carrying breakable cargo. I watched his taillights until they were just red dots on a gray morning. Back in my truck, I placed the folder on the passenger seat and rested a hand on it. Some doors you close for yourself. Some you close so your son won't have to. 6 months later, ink dried where promises used to live. Dana filed, argued, and settled without spectacle. The decree named what stayed and what went. I kept the house and the business. I didn't sprint back to the old address. I moved with a carpenter's caution. Measure twice, cut once. Utilities in my name, insurance squared, a locksmith rekeying his own front door because symbolism matters. I carried boxes in quietly, ledgers for Miller Security Solutions, a coffee mug Luke made in 3rd grade, my father's chisels. The rooms felt different, like a church on a weekday, same pews, new silence. I stood in the entry and turned the new deadbolt. Clean throw, no grit. I walked from room to room, testing windows, touching frames, making a list like I would for any client. Patch here, tighten there, replace that hinge. People think closure is an event. It's not. It's a punch list. That night, I slept in my own bed and didn't dream. News travels in small towns the way rain finds gutters. I didn't broadcast anything, but stories found their slope. Emily moved out quietly, then loudly, then to someplace I stopped asking about. Word reached me, secondhand, then not at all, that Dr. Pierce's wife filed, his kids went cold, and the hospital asked hard questions with soft voices. I didn't celebrate. I swept my porch, changed the oil, and let other people narrate their own storms. When you've lived through a personal fire, you don't enjoy the smell of smoke next door. A neighbor asked me, "You hear about the doctor?" I nodded and said I wished them strength. That was true. Pain passed to someone else doesn't reduce your own. It just proves it's contagious. I carried my toolbox to the truck and went to work. The world will hand you gossip like a free sample. Older men know. Calories without nutrition. I had locks to fix and a payroll to meet. Miller Security Solutions became the right kind of busy. Word got around that I showed up on time, kept my mouth shut, and solved the problem without selling the customer a new life. Small businesses called first. Salons, vets, the tire shop. Then a school needed master keys audited. Then a warehouse wanted access control with audit trails. I hired a part-timer, then a second, both veterans with steady hands and no appetite for drama. We built a whiteboard schedule that looked like a Tetris game and cleared it anyway. I liked the rhythm. Coffee at 6, inventory by 7, first job at 8, invoices after lunch, Quick check on the house repairs before supper. The work put muscle back where the worry had lived. At night, I'd sit on the porch and listen to crickets saw the dark into manageable pieces. A man rebuilds himself by doing the next necessary thing. One hinge at a time, the world turned smooth again. I met Rachel Bennett because a back door didn't want to latch. Her bookstore smelled like paper and rain and something warm in the back room. She watched me work the strike plate and asked the kind of questions people ask when they respect the answer. Divorced a few years, one grown daughter, reads everything with a spine. We traded small information like neighbors borrow sugar, enough to bake something later. When I finished, she tried the door herself. "Feels right," she said, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Ease that didn't ask for proof. We talked at the counter about weather, then inventory systems, then the kind of customers who still say thank you. She offered coffee because that's what decent people do at 4 in the afternoon. I told her I'd come by Saturday to check the alley light. She smiled. "I'll be here." The lock clicked behind me like a promise that knew its limits. We didn't rush. Thursdays became coffee, Saturdays became a walk past the farmer's market, and messages stayed short enough to feel honest. Rachel kept her words clean. No puzzles, no stage directions. "I like your steadiness," she said once, as if naming a tool in my bag. I learned her bookstore's rhythms. Mornings slow, lunch busy, a last-minute flurry when the sky threatened rain. I fixed the alley light, oiled the front bell, and replaced a stubborn cylinder that hated winter. She wouldn't let me comp the parts. "Fair is fair," she said, sliding a check across the counter. On a Tuesday after closing, she poured tea and said, "Love isn't a grand gesture, it's small truth, daily." That line landed where it needed to. In a life that had been too loud, the quiet felt like real music. I drove home under streetlights that looked less like interrogations and more like guides. Something good was learning my name. Life got simpler because I made it simple. I ate what I cooked. I answered the calls I could take and said no to the ones I couldn't. Luke came by on Sundays with stories about work and a woman named Angela who made him laugh like he did at 12. We installed cameras around the house, not because I was scared, but because prevention is cheaper than regret. I kept a chair for Rachel on the porch and a blanket inside for when the wind turned. Some nights we'd read the same chapter in different chairs and not fill the silence with anything but breathing. I stopped checking the tracker app because there was nothing left worth tracking. The ring stayed in the safe, not a trophy, not a wound, just a tool I don't use anymore. One evening, Rachel locked the bookshop, tucked her arm in mine, and said, "Ready?" I was. Not for drama. For an ordinary future I could trust. 2 years later, Rachel and I married the way we live. Simple, on purpose. Her bookstore closed early. We set chairs in the garden out back and strung warm bulbs from the maple to the fence. Luke stood beside me as best man, steady and proud, a grown man who still checks my tie like a coach checks laces. Rachel's daughter, Ava, handed her a bouquet tied with twine. The vows were short, not because we felt little, but because we meant much. We promised to show up, to tell the truth, to fix small things before they turn big. The minister asked if anyone objected, and the wind answered by lifting the lights just enough to make everyone laugh. We signed the license on the counter where she prices paperbacks. After cake and hugs, I turned the key in our front door, and it felt like the door turned me back, toward a life that finally fit. 7 years rolled forward the way good years do. Quiet chores, shared holidays, miles on tires that refused to quit. Luke called to say Angela said yes, spring wedding at the country club west of town, nothing fussy. I polished my shoes, pressed my suit, and watched Rachel pin a flower to my lapel with hands that never shake. The ceremony was open sky and honest smiles. When the music started, Luke steadied his voice and promised the same small daily truths I'd come to trust. I saw Emily a few rows back, thinner, careful, a stranger beside her who kept checking his phone. She didn't wave, neither did I. We were two people who once shared a house and now shared only a son who had learned somehow to turn out kind. During photos, the photographer asked for Dad and Luke. Rachel stepped beside me without being asked. We shaped ourselves around our boy and stood tall. The photographer's joke made Luke laugh like he did at 12, head tipped, eyes bright. The shutter clicked. Rachel on my left, Luke in the middle, my arm around his shoulders. Later, that frame went everywhere. Mantle, wallets, profiles. It looked like peace and felt like a rival. Across the room, Emily saw it on someone's screen and covered her mouth the way people do when they finally understand the cost. She cried, quiet, then turned away. I didn't follow. The older you get, the more you learn some doors aren't yours to reopen. We ate cake, toasted the couple, and watched the dance floor fill with people who still believed in trying. On the drive home, Rachel rested her hand on my arm and said, "He's okay." I nodded. The life I built after the fire had held. Back at the house, I locked up, checked the porch light, and listened to the click that means enough. Here's what I learned on the far side of ruin. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is step away from what's destroying him. I'm a locksmith. My trade is opening what's stuck, but not every door deserves to be forced. I left a ring, a photograph, a 5-word note, and walked toward a life that could look me in the eye. I didn't win. I chose peace. The house is quiet. The business steady. My son stands tall. Rachel and I keep small daily truths, the kind that hold when the noise fades. At night I lock up and sleep. If you're standing where I stood, between pride and survival, remember, you're allowed to protect your life. Leave well or stay well, but choose on purpose. Choose your side. #team walk away. When trust is broken, or #teamwork. It out when you believe shattered things can still be set true. Drop your tag, share your take, and subscribe for the next story. We're listening tonight.